Coming up on this edition of the Black Vault Radio, the Warzone.com's creator, Mr. Tyler Rogoway, steps into the vault. We dive deep into his past as a journalist and how his in-depth coverage on all things military and defense led him to become also a well-known name in today's coverage on the UFO phenomenon.
If you could crack this nut and you have the ability to do it, you'd be the man or the woman. You'd be the top news story in the world. Any of it's real, that'd be huge. But there are real parts, and that's the thing that we found out when I was looking into it. The after-action report on that, too, it seems that it hit a certain level, and they didn't want any more to do with it as far as investigating it. So, it sounds to me like maybe at the very flag level, the top potentially knew that there was a test going on. There's parts of this that kind of discount everything that you could say, oh, it was this, or this. So I just leave it out there. I have no answer. I have nothing to give you on that as a definitive answer, or even something that I'm leaning on.
All that and much more. So stay tuned. The Black Vault Radio is about to begin. More than 20 years ago, I began a journey. My quest for the truth. My name is John Greenewald, and I have hammered the United States government with Freedom of Information Act requests trying to get answers. I have more than 2 million pages of declassified documents for you to download at theblackvault.com. Now, I attempt to dive even deeper and talk to some of the most brilliant minds on this planet. No government secret is off limits, and no question is off the table. All I aim for is the truth. This is the Black Vault Radio. That's right, everybody. This is the Black Vault Radio. I am your host, John Greenewald Jr. As always, thank you so much for tuning in, making this your podcast and radio show of choice. I know that there are a ton of options out there, so I appreciate you either sticking with me and feeling that you needed to listen to more than one episode, because that's always a good thing, but also for those that are tuning in for the first time, welcome to the show. In short, I tackle all sorts of topics on this. If you like the documents on the Black Vault, which deal with a wide array of topics, that's exactly what this show is all about. So I appreciate you tuning in again, either for the first time or for sticking with me. If you could all do me a favor, though, if you do like this show, I would really, really appreciate if you could log on to however you are listening, whether it be iTunes, Google Play Store, Stitcher. There's quite a few different options, and add a review for the show. That would be very, very helpful to me, because the more reviews that are there, obviously those different places that you're listening will profile it for those other listeners that might be looking for a show like this. So that's very, very helpful to me. Obviously, everything is free and commercial free. So you can download and stream all of the episodes, and you don't have to wait for commercials and have a great conversation interrupted by a commercial break. That's not what this show is about. It's just about sharing information. So I hope you do enjoy it. And the only thing I ask is if you can add that review, again, very, very helpful to me. One page that I want to point out, and you will listen, as you listen, you will notice that I pointed out a couple times throughout the show for a reason. That's the show notes page. The show notes page is all of just that. The show notes for the interviews that I do that will link over to articles and videos and books, photographs, you name it. If we're talking about it, it's on the show notes page. So I created this page to kind of help you guys out. Call it a roadmap to the episode, if you will. It's real easy to get to, just theblackvault.com/show notes. That will forward you to the page that breaks down each and every episode that you can stream. It goes right back to episode 1 with my friend, the late Stanton Friedman. He was the first guest that I brought on. You can listen to all of those episodes, including last week's, in case you missed it, which will loosely tie into this one. I interviewed Dave Beatty, who is the mastermind behind the Nimitz Encounters film. That was a lot of fun to kind of pick his brain and just kind of see why he did it, and also ask him about the Nimitz encounter itself. We keep hearing about it, but very much in brief. So we got to go into a lot of great detail. Don't miss that episode if you did. Make sure you go back into the archives and stream that. This one, though, is also something not to miss. The mastermind behind the Warzone.com, Mr. Tyler Rogoway, journalist who has dropped quite a few UFO-related articles. And let me just first say, he drops a lot of articles, not just on UFOs. He's not a quote-unquote UFO journalist. There's a couple out there that I don't know if they like that title or if they've adopted it, or I don't know what. That's not Tyler. Tyler's a real journalist. He works for thedrive.com. Again, specifically the warzone.com. It's all connected. And he's dropped these articles, and they're really, in some cases, very in-depth, very detailed reports. Other ones are a little bit more condensed, but very much unique across the board. And what I mean by that is he's not doing what I call copy and paste journalism. And copy and paste journalism is one outlet will run a story, and then like 100 outlets, they may not even give credit to that original one, but they'll run it too in their own way. And so they'll rewrite it and write it and copy and paste pretty much the gist of the article, and you see the same darn thing, 100 if not 1,000 times over. Tyler very much goes into great detail, and these pieces are very unique to thedrive.com and the warzone.com. So I'm excited to bring him on, talk a little bit about his background in journalism, but also his UFO interests, because I don't know a lot about it, to be blatantly honest with you. I've known Tyler for a little bit, but never really sat down and picked his brain and tried to figure out where he's at and what he thinks about UFOs. And that is my aim with the interview, and he's coming up in just a couple of minutes. Sticking with the UFO topic, though, a couple different things to deal with here before we get going. That's definitely worth a mention. Actually, this isn't even a UFO thing, but I'll mention it anyway. The FBI, under the Freedom of Information Act, released what they call their VEXIM list. Now, what the heck is a VEXIM list? Well, I had to look the word up myself on exactly what they meant a few years ago when I found out yours truly, was on this list by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. What the VEXIM list is a list, a very short list of people around the world that annoy them, that annoy the Freedom of Information Act office, whether that be because of the volume of requests, meaning the number of requests that are sent in, or the number of pages that we're requesting, meaning if you do 1,000 requests and it yields 10 pages per request, that's a heck of a lot different than someone who does 100 requests but yields 100,000 pages per request. My whole point is you can get on this list if you annoy them in whichever way. Well, yours truly found himself on the list yet again. Thankfully, I'm not at the top of the list, so the spotlight is, not quite on me when it comes to annoying the heck out of the FBI. But that was interesting for me to see. It was not my FOIA request. This was a FOIA requester by the name of Emma Best, and she does quite a few different FOIA requests, such as myself. I'm always a big fan of those who utilize the FOIA and succeed with it. Emma is definitely one of those, posted thousands of documents, hundreds of thousands online, and so I would definitely check her out on Twitter. And you can Google her name. I know she's connected to muckrock.com is where she posts quite a bit of her articles. Anyway, it was her FOIA request that yielded this, as far as I am aware. And I was tagged on Twitter. And that's kind of how I found out that I was on this list. So not the first time I was on the list, but kind of fun nonetheless to see it. I'm not sure if it makes me nervous or not, but even though I kind of jokingly said, hey, I'm not on the top of the list, so there's a few more that are more annoying than me, every time I see this list when it's published, And they kind of rank the people by number of requests and, again, number of pages that were yielded from those requests. I kind of feel deep down that I need to pick up my FOIA game a little bit. Need to file a little bit more, maybe move up the list a little bit. And I feel like I'm falling behind. So, it's fun to see that list, though. If I annoy them, well, if anybody from the FBI is listening, I'm really sorry that I annoy you. Not my intent, but obviously I always love preserving that history because the FBI does. Sadly, they have a history and a knack for deleting documents or destroying or shredding documents. That's proven time and time again. So that's one of the reasons why I do what I do, is preserve that history, because if I can get it in 2019 and they end up shredding it in 2022, well, that's good, because theblackvault.com will have it thereafter. The one thing news-wise that I did want to quickly point out this week that happened, I mean, it just seems like it's raining UFO headlines lately. I don't know if you guys feel the same way. But this particular one was about I'm going to pull up the article here, a classified briefing on UFOs, that there were senators that were briefed in a classified Pentagon briefing this Wednesday. Now, that would be, as of the recording of this, June 19th, that there was a classified briefing on the topic of UFOs. Now, this story was broken by Mr. Brian Bender of Politico. Now, if you don't know who he is, ironically, he's the one that's appearing on Unidentified on the History Channel in at least episode 1. I haven't seen after episode 1. I do have them taped. My lovely children kind of prohibit me from watching as many television shows as I'd like. Sadly, it's more Power Rangers lately with my son, if not anything to do with dinosaurs. So UFO programs on the History Channel is sadly not streaming on my television as much as I'd like, but be that as it may, I do know that Brian was on at least episode 1. He's the journalist that broke one of the few from Politico on December 16th, 2017, originally the ATIP story. That obviously went and coincided with the New York Times article by Ralph Blumenthal, Helene Cooper, and Leslie Kean. So he was in that mix from day one. And so he breaks this story this week about these senators getting a classified briefing on UFO sightings. Now, one of them was Senator Mark Warner. He's a Democrat from Virginia who was in this briefing. And in the halls, there was a reporter who was able to ask him a question, and was able to ask him about specifically that UFO briefing. Now, this particular one was a short clip. It was posted by Alan He from CBS. He's reporting from Capitol Hill, and so he cornered Senator Warner and asked about UFOs. Take a listen. This is what Senator Warner said.
Concerned should we be about the briefing that you received on UFOs? Is that a concern that for pilots? Is there anything you can mention to us about that?
Well, I think some of the press reports are accurate. I think people are taking this issue much more seriously, and I'm not going to get into any of the contents of the briefing. It was a classified briefing, but what I think one of the key takeaways I'd have is that the military and others are taking this issue seriously, which I think in previous generations may not have been the case.
So that's what he said. What's funny is you obviously can't see it because you were listening to this show, but if you do look up that video by Senator Mark Warner, and if you look at what I assume is a staffer, I didn't spend a ton of time trying to figure out who this lady was, but it looks like she's just following around the senator and is some kind of staffer. You can see a clear eye roll and puts her head back like, oh, geez, a UFO question. So I kind of got a kick out of that. The answer itself, it really doesn't add much to the story. We have no idea what these guys talked about. I always get a kick out of when media outlets profile classified briefings or classified whatever. and it's secretive and you can't talk about it, but they're publishing these articles about it. I mean, there's just a little bit of irony there that, if it's such a classified briefing, and here we are with a reporter in the hall, Senator Warner's being cornered, being asked about a classified briefing. I always find a kind of some humor in that, but regardless, there was something that was said. He finds it something that is of great importance. That's a good thing. I mean, it really is. I think that this topic really does need to have very much a closer look. So I support all of this attention that it's getting. Just find it strange that Mr. Brian Bender finds himself breaking and scooping a story again, which if you don't follow this, not only did Brian Bender break that December 2017 story, like I already mentioned, but he's also the one that broke the Navy drafting UFO guidelines. Now, obviously, I've got some Freedom of Information Act requests out on that. I think I actually might be close into getting some documents, but not to tease you too much. But there is hopefully some updates coming soon. But Brian Bender was the one that broke that one too. So he seemingly has kind of his hand into the cookie jar somewhere that's allowing him to know about these things. I wonder where that is. Maybe I'll reach out to Brian. Maybe he'll come on the show and tell us a few of his secrets. Who knows? But that being said, I'll link over to that Politico article. It's worth taking a look at. Again, it's a classified briefing, so we don't know much about it. I'm not a fan of anonymous sources. And of course, Brian Bender's got a couple anonymous sources out there about, these UFO topics and who's talking about it. There was one unidentified, pardon the pun, former government official. The quote was, "There are people coming out of the woodwork." That is a quote, that are looking for these briefings and meetings, or those that are participating in the meetings. Who knows? Again, not a big fan of anonymous sources, but looks like this really did take place. Senator Warner did not deny it. Just didn't add too much to the story. But who knows? Again, it's raining UFO headlines. It's always fun to see. I am an advocate for more exposure to this topic. I'm just an even bigger advocate for having it stay truthful. So I'm hoping that these headlines really are what we are led to believe that they are. But there's all sorts of cases out there. There's some new UFO sightings that were making the big headlines. Of course, very controversial whether or not they are literally weather balloons. That explanation is very popular nowadays, especially with the Google balloons that are going up. So that's always a connection. Bob Lazar is actually back in the picture. I say that because, I interviewed Jeremy Corbell last year about his documentary, and I like Jeremy. He's a friend of the show. And hopefully he will stay a friend of the show. I'm just not a fan of that Bob Lazar story. I felt that there are enough red flags about that story to put it to rest. And the supporting evidence that, some people tout about it, I think there's potential explanations there. And, well, this week, Bob Lazar himself, along with Jeremy, appeared here in the last day with Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan has well over 5 million YouTube subscribers. So like within hours, that thing had, 100, 200,000 streams. And of course, it'll go into the millions here as the days tick on. But as I was recording this, he had already had hundreds of thousands of listens on his YouTube thing. That's incredible. Kudos to Joe. A lot of my episodes here are now getting about 75 to 100,000 streams of the Black Vault Radio every time I put an episode up, and growing, which I'm excited about. So I'm really proud of those streams, but man, imagine having that in like an hour. And then it just goes into the millions within days. I mean, that's incredible. Well, Bob Lazar was on there. So it's weird to see all of these people resurfacing from 30 years ago. Again, Bob Lazar. And there's even leaked documents, which I'm going to be talking about here pretty quickly on this show. Not this episode, but the what they're calling the Wilson leak. Richard Dolan is out there saying that this is the leak of the century. It sounds like he's already convinced that these are real. Of course, these are very controversial. So these are fun times in the UFO field. Let me tell you, there's a lot to come. There really is. I've got a very cool guest coming up in the next week or two to talk specifically about those leaks, what they mean. Are they real? Are they not? And yes, all of this brings up yet another aspect to the UFO phenomena field of research that has laid rather quiet for decades. The Roswell alien autopsy film. Yes, that is back as well. Hey, if Bob Lazar comes back, why not throw the Santilli film in with it? Let's just throw everything from the last 70 years worth of UFO research. Even if it's been debunked, let's bring it up. Let's figure out some more leaked documents and make some TV shows out of it. Oh, by the way, History Channel's making a Skinwalker series. If you didn't see that today, that's another headline. Yes, the Skinwalker Ranch is now a History Channel series. I'm telling you, it's been an interesting week. All right, let me not waste any more time. Mr. Tyler Rogoway is coming up. Stay tuned. On this episode's TBV Dialogue segment, I welcome Mr. Tyler Rogoway, the creator of the Warzone.com, one of the most popular and dynamic defense-related websites on the internet. Serving millions of people every month, the site concentrates on air, sea, land, and space military capabilities, as well as various military strategies. Before Tyler was involved with the launch of the Warzone.com, he built the popular Foxtrot Alpha subsite for Gizmodo Media Group. Prior to that, Tyler created the personal defense commentary site aviationintel.com, a site that fused defense technology and geopolitics, as well as unafraid opinion on defense-related and national security topics into a single rolling narrative. Recently, Tyler has dropped some very in-depth UFO-related stories, and he's here to talk about them all. Let me welcome to the show Mr. Tyler Rogoway.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Hey, it's great to have you. You've definitely made some waves, pardon the pun, especially in the last couple weeks, although I know you've had a history of kind of touching the UFO topic in your writing. And off the air, I kind of mentioned to you, it seemed like it's picked up a lot of pace. I don't know if that's a personal interest of yours or if that's by demand from the Warzone.com readers, but I kind of want to dig into your background as a journalist because you can tell you do a lot of work, background work, and you don't have a spin either way, at least not one that I've caught. I mean, you kind of skirt the middle, which I appreciate, because a lot of times with journalists now when they cover the story, it's either one way or the other. There's kind of no middle ground. And I've kind of noticed that I can't tell where you stand on the topic when I read the articles, which is a good thing. That's a compliment, by the way. So I want to kind of dig into your personal background. How did you get started in journalism? And then take us to where you got interested in UFOs.
Yeah, I mean, this is a business that chose me more than me choosing it. I had a whole different career for years, coming out of college, owning my own businesses, and for better or for worse, and doing stuff that didn't necessarily have to do with any of this topic. But the passion of my life was defense technology. I mean, to the point that it was an obsession when I was growing up, and through college, when other people were checking out, the next the sports scores, I'm reading Jane's. It just really was. It has been like a cornerstone of my life. Mm-hmm. And I had, very powerful opinions about a lot of things and saw a lot of areas that were lacking in defense journalism. There are great people doing great things, but I saw kind of an opportunity for a different type of program and a website that I would want to read, dealing with some topics that maybe aren't usually tracked by the big names in the media space. And so I just decided to start blogging. I'm one of the people that, it's rare now, that was a blogger that it basically blew up and turned into something that became a full-time career, and I'm very happy for it. I love what I do. Obviously, if you read my work, it's not just a job. I was doing it for free for quite a long, couple of years before I was doing it to get paid. Mm-hmm. So that's where I come from. I don't have a military background. Even in my family, we're not like a military family. It's just, like I say, it's something that I've studied to a level that I don't think you can get from a university in a lot of ways. And that's, hopefully showed up in the work. And, people love the site. They have a lot of fun with it. And we are able to, like I say, cover topics, everything from pop culture to secret programs that, it just doesn't get, we don't see that being being dealt with this particular space. And so it's a lot of fun, and hopefully we're able to do some good at the same time.
Do you have a personal favorite on what to cover, or do you just love it all?
I love it all, and it's all a narrative. So everything that we do, like all the stories kind of tied together, we can't cover everything. So we have to choose the topics we do, and we really just pitbull those topics like as much as we can and dig and get as much as we can out of them. But it's usually the stuff that I'm interested in, and it's because I think that's what people are interested in. Some of this stuff, like the UFO thing, obviously is a big one. But when it comes to secretive, programs, the history of aerospace programs that are, clandestine and things like that, you have to obviously fill in a lot of holes and connect some dots. But these are topics that people have a huge interest in. And, it's just not a lot of people can service them and do them justice. So we try to do that the best we can. And also breaking news, letting people see open source information, fusing as much of that together in real time to let people really get an idea of what's happening with big news that really matters, as opposed to just waiting for, the next, story to pop up a day later. We'll do real-time coverage on an event, and we'll do it for 24 hours straight, live updating the site. So, like I say, it's just a different type of product than you find anywhere else, and it seems to really work and resonate with people.
Before we get to the UFO topic, obviously here it is June 21st when this episode drops onto the internet. Obviously, people are going to be listening to it for long thereafter. But in the last 24 hours or so, there's obviously been a lot of breaking news with that drone shoot down in Iran.
Right.
Can you kind of very quickly give us what the update and latest is here on the 21st on what's going on? Do you think that there's going to be a strike back? I have not admittedly been able to watch the news in the last few hours, so I'm blind. So I'm curious. What's going on?
The problem with this is it's not a really approachable subject for people, including the news. We're talking about semi-autonomous unmanned aircraft systems, so it's very opaque if you're jumping in that and you're a national security reporter that it has a Pentagon beat. It's just, even the military didn't get it right. We were the first one to come out and say exactly what that aircraft was. I was tweeting about it in real time. It was not what was being originally sort of officials were circulating. So
wait. So the media got it wrong?
Yeah, absolutely.
No, that can't be true. If it's on television, it has to be true, Tyler.
No, exactly. I know. And,
so what was?
We're not there to call slam our fists and call BS or anything. We're just trying to help and let them understand the nuances, the differences in systems can mean a lot of different things and can actually impact the story. And this one it did, because this wasn't the aircraft they thought it was. It was a cousin of it, a precursor of it. And it matters to the story for sure when you're talking about a geopolitical event like this.
So before we move on, do you think this is as big of a story that the media has made? Like, where did they? And again, I'm not. But joking aside, I make jokes all the time. But joking aside, I'm not trying to bash anybody. But the larger narrative that is something that we see on the nightly news, is it as what they're trying to say? Like, what is wrong with that story that we're seeing on the nightly news here in the last day?
Well, I think that they're getting a better idea of really what happened, and people are educating themselves on these systems and sort of the challenges of operating in that particular little slice of the world, which is extremely complex and crowded, beyond the cultural and geopolitical aspects involved, right? But reality is they shot down a drone. They knew what it was. It wasn't a pot shot taken at an aircraft. This was something that they planned to do. These aircraft, the Global Hawk family of aircraft, fly in that area of the world constantly. They're flying that route all the time. So the Iranians have watched this and hated for years. And we're talking a decade. So they decided that this was the best thing to do, knowing it was a drone. They're not putting they're not killing human beings. It is a robot. It is replaceable. It is not, a pilot and where their family's grieving today. So it's a big difference. That goes into a lot of areas of warfare that are emerging. The use of drones obviously is a lower threshold, and also the ability to take them down, or the drive to take them down. There's a lower threshold in doing that as well. And so we're seeing that play out. There was apparently this attack that was planned that was going to be targeting their air defense systems in that little pocket of the world where this was shot down. And it didn't happen. I'm glad it didn't happen. It shouldn't have happened. This is a narrative that we're playing into with the Iranians. They wanted this, clearly, right? I mean, they did it. They admitted it. Unlike the tanker thing.
You're talking about a retaliatory strike, right?
Yes.
Okay, I got you.
Kinetic strike. Kinetic weapons on the ground, blowing stuff up, killing people. So if you're going to do that, and I was tweeting about this, pick a target where you know that there's going to be no human deaths, and that's hard to do, or use other tools like cyber warfare and whatnot that you can use. But really, what the Iranians, the whole reason this is happening is that they're really being hurt economically. And there's a ton of pressure internally in the country, with economics and the economic pressure of sanctions. And it's really crushing the situation for the leadership in that country. They're worried. There's protests and riots and things that we don't normally see over there, or at least not constantly. And so really, in my opinion, if you want to push this forward, don't play into their narrative, don't react with a kinetic strike. That seems to be what they're wanting. And it creates a good enemy domestically, more so than we already are. Go to, make a plea to the world and say, listen, this is where we're at. Next time it's going to be an airliner, potentially, or worse. And we need to put massive sanctions, more sanctions on that country. And that's, if you really want to put pressure on them, that's what's going to do it. Not taking out a few surface-to-air missile sites that they can just replace tomorrow. Which is, so it's not even really monetary. They have the capability that they could just fill in, and it's all just optics. So that's what I would say. I think that there's an opportunity to push where they pulled, and really hit them where it hurts the most, and maybe change their behavior in doing so, or at least let them know that doing something like this ends up with a situation that they wanted the least.
Wow. It's an amazing story. It's a scary world we live in. www.thewarzone.com will get you into that site where you can follow Tyler's work, and you guys got a team of writers. You do coverage on, obviously, all sorts of things. One of which, though, that I want to start picking your brain on a little bit is the UFO topic, moving away from the Iranian drone shoot down and situation there. Tell me a little bit about how you started going from, not that you don't cover this anymore, but covering the defense industry, and then UFOs kind of popped up on your radar. How did that come about?
It's funny you say it pop up on the radar, because that's actually what happened. Obviously, anybody in this business, most people in the aerospace business would have some interest in the whole UFO background. I think it's not talked about a lot, but there's that taboo about it. But I think people, if you're into aircraft and defense or whatever, this has been something that at least has been in our pop culture for the better part of a century. So there's that part of it. I've always had an interest in it. And a lot of it has to do with just seeing if, reports are secret programs and not, UFOs from outer space, right? It's what people are seeing a lot of times is misconstrued, but can help me in my reporting and looking for patterns that maybe lead to a secret program or whatnot that is underway and in testing or in an operational state. So there's that part of it too. But in late 2017, in October, it was this story that I kind of started getting whiffs about of a UFO encounter, which is really what it is, that happened all the way from Northern California through up the Willamette Valley in Oregon, and really to the border of Washington, with multiple airliners, air traffic control, visual sighting that continued for 45 minutes in a very high trafficked area of the country. And so, I started piecing this together and, reaching out to people that were able to give me a little bit of color on it. And it ended up being a very, very interesting story that I went to press with. And we had all the radio communications and, so this was documented. This wasn't people just, third person saying that there were sightings. We had hard proof that something happened with air traffic controllers literally telling these pilots to look out their window to see it that they couldn't see on radar, an object flying with them coming up the coast that was, up the Willamette Valley that was unidentified. So, bottom line, this was a huge story. It was an international story, did very well. And once again, we just portrayed the facts, let people figure out what they think it was. I had no answers on this one. We filed a bunch of FOIA requests and got back unbelievable documentation. It is the most well-documented, quote-unquote, UFO event that I've seen for a very long time. We got the actual phone calls with the FAA, like when this was happening in real time between the different managers and even back to D.C., and the phone calls for the investigation directly with the pilots. And really, it painted a picture that the military, in real time, the air defense side of things, and the FAA after the fact, nobody knew what this was, and they don't deal with this often. Mm-hmm. They really had no way to even classify this, and these are conversations that, they didn't think that were going to be pulled in a FOIA request and put online. These people are trying to figure out, these are like bureaucrats,
mm-hmm.
how do we even file this, that sort of thing. And so it really gave a naked look at an event like this, a modern event like this. And that second story on it blew up huge. And really, before this even started, I was always warned not to jump into this world from colleagues. It's taboo, it'll ruin your career, people won't take you seriously. And I really disagreed with that. I think that it's just fair to talk about things that we see in our atmosphere that we can't explain. I think it's just part of life that as curious people we should just at least discuss it. Doesn't mean it's aliens. Doesn't mean it's something that isn't terrestrial made by our own hand, or it's just a mistake of some sort.
Yeah.
So that's how I tried to treat the subject. Did another big story that I broke about a UFO encounter over Arizona with multiple pilots. Similar deal. That was mine. That went all over the world. Stolen by most outlets, right? Not a lot of credit given, but that was even honestly bigger than the other one, but not as well documented. And so, and then there's another one in Long Island, but they're all the same. I'm just taking hard sourcing, putting it out there, and letting people kind of get an idea of what's going on and how this stuff is dealt with. So there's multiple levels of interest in this beyond just, wow, what is it? It's how does the government deal with this?
Yeah.
What do pilots say in real time on the radio when they see something like this? And you can see the cultural stigma of this even on the radio communications. So it was just interesting to us and our readership on all different levels. And I didn't get one of all the comments. We have a very active comment section and email. I mean, you can hit me and get to me a million different ways, right? To make a comment or send an idea or whatever. Not one time have I ever had somebody say, wow, man, you really damaged yourself. I can't believe you're into UFOs. Not one.
Yeah.
It's never happened. And so I believe that if you deal with the subject on that level, and I've loosened up a little bit over time because things have changed.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you deal with it on that level and coming from a defense background and demanding that this is being treated seriously, and investigated seriously, regardless of where the investigation ends up. Right?
Yeah.
I don't care what it is. I'm not in love with the magician. I'm in love with how the trick is being done. You know what I'm saying? That's what I want to know. And I think a lot of people feel similar. So that's how I do it. That's why it's worked. It was approached differently. And frankly, I'm extremely happy I did it and took the chance. It was one of the best decisions I've made. And now I was in a place when this kind of new age we're in, apparently, with ATIP and with the reporting that we're seeing with To the Stars Academy and everything else, I kind of was able to step in that as a trusted source,
mm-hmm.
a level head that people felt comfortable with listening to, knowing that I'm not here to slam a narrative down your neck that this is coming from another dimension or, Zeta Reticuli.
Yeah.
Okay. And really what I say, and that fits in what I truly believe, is that the sky's going to look very different in the years to come, in the near future. And that is because there are so many technologies that are being now in high development that we've never seen in the skies, from what's going on in developing space as a battlefield to drone swarms. And I'm not talking about the little stuff you see on 60 Minutes. I'm talking about large unmanned combat air vehicles that work cooperatively via data link and can overwhelm an enemy just because they have a decision cycle time of 0, okay? This is stuff that we haven't seen. Stealth technology is now proliferating. I can go on and on. Hypersonics. So, there's that, and there's also the reality that the U.S. government has poured untold billions of dollars into the black programs for the better part of a century. And people don't get it. This is not just F-117 and stealth technology, and, they also do some pretty exotic investments, okay? And they're trying to figure out new breakthroughs that they can get an strategic advantage over our enemies. And this has to do with propulsion. This has to do with all, visual stealth, all different types of things that are considered exotic, okay? What's to say they haven't had a major breakthrough? It's almost impossible to say they haven't because of the amount of money that they pumped into it and how little we've seen come out of it. And sometimes if a breakthrough is big enough, you can't necessarily just say, well, we're not going to buy F-35s anymore because this technology is better, because it would really impact the world in many different ways and industries and everything else. And it's so buried in compartmentalized programs that maybe it will never see the light of day. This is not something that is for sure. This is a possibility. So that's how I come at the topic, and I think people really appreciate it, and that's why when now we've seen the cycle really condense as far as reporting goes, with new things happening quickly, whether they're real or disinformation, it's something that some of it I have to comment on.
Yeah.
So then I'll move to do a post, and that's sort of the cycle of how I execute now, of where it started and kind of what I'm doing today.
You're very active on Twitter, which is always fun to see. I always like seeing your posts and comments and stuff. For those who want to follow Tyler, it is at aviation_intel. And like I said, it is a very active Twitter account, and he definitely chimes in, and it's always fun to see. Now, I want to ask you about those original articles that you had brought up. When you as a journalist approached that, if I can, not necessarily now, but back then, did you have a preconceived notion that you were out to either prove UFOs were real and it's not military tech, or skeptic and you're going to go ahead and prove that it's some kind of top secret tech? Or did you just not have any, pardon the pun, drive to do either? It was just a report.
Yeah, so that's a great question. No, I'm here to disprove it if I can. I mean, the best posts that we do are debunking posts, and we do some big ones. Stuff that goes viral, if it's, I'll go and debunk it, and that's some of the best work we do. So if there's a way for me to say this is something else, that is like immediately for me. And if there's even a plausible explanation that is highly weighted, then you got to put it out there. So with these particular situations, especially the Oregon one, that is really unique. With the hundreds of interviews I've done on just that one event. I have no idea what this was, and frankly, the military still doesn't. I know that for a fact on multiple levels, and NORAD doesn't. Okay, so the big military here. We're not talking some secret program. Could it have been an aircraft of some sort that like an unmanned aircraft that went off the leash potentially and strayed from maybe a range in northern Nevada potentially, but. Really, no. There's parts of this that kind of discount everything that you could say, oh, it was this, or this. So I just leave it out there. I have no answer. I have nothing to give you on that as a definitive answer, or even something that I'm leaning on. And that's kind of where I stand today on the UFO topic too. Is just fast forward to now. Is I don't know what this is. I have some pieces that are in the works that are going to show possible answers for this. That, you know, there might be, and a lot of times there's more than one answer to a problem, right? People are seeing things, you know, that are extraordinary. Well, maybe there's multiple answers as what they're seeing, right? And it doesn't have to be just one answer, one source. So I'll be presenting some of that very soon, to try to say, hey, listen, there are other possibilities here than just being a very high-performance craft. But the problem with that is we run into the performance is so high on the visual end when people see these visually, and there's been multiple visual sightings, not just the Tic Tac, not just the one off the Virginia coast that's been disclosed. There's been multiple. And I can't go into it. You know, you're going to be hearing more about it in the future. And frankly, I'm not at a point to give details on it if I could. I just multiple sources have informed me on this. So, you know, you look at it and you say, okay, well, what's out there? What could potentially do it? And then you just work back from there. But there's no definitive answer at this point. There just isn't. And anybody who says there is, they're lying to you, because if they did, you know, it'd be the number one story in the world right now.
Yeah.
Right. If you could crack this nut and you have the ability to do it, you'd be the man or the woman. You'd be the top news story in the world. So I'm interested and curious and on this journey, just like so many other people. And I think that maybe that vulnerability to a certain extent in my writing makes people feel comfortable with reading the topic, because there isn't a narrative. It's not just saying, oh man, this is all BS and it's bullshit, and it's all a cover up. Oh, I talk about the possibility, sure, that this is a disinformation campaign. Absolutely. That is true, but with that, there has to be a technology combination, because some of this has happened for sure. I'm 100. I went on record saying I believe that this performance exists with this technology. I believe people have seen this that are the best trained observers, and it's real. So then it goes to who has it. What exactly are they seeing visually? Is it a real object as they are perceiving it? I mean, these are the questions we need to ask. But I don't throw it out and say, oh, they're all, you know, the people that we entrust with an $80 million fighter to go and, you know, drop a bomb on and kill a bunch of people overseas, right? That they're just out there and they turned crazy one day, then got back in the cockpit the next.
Yeah,
and it's just crap. It's such crap, you know. And a lot of that has been instilled by the military and the government. The government above all else. They've used this topic. They've abused it for decades, and we have the documents on that. So it's not just a conjecture; it's true. They've used it to cover up their own clandestine activities, and you know they've screwed with the population on this. So are they trustworthy? No, they're not.
Last week, I went into great detail with Mr. Dave Beatty on the Nimitz Encounters film that he did. Now, you kind of took that story to kind of the next level. You researched the technology behind it, and here in the last couple of weeks or so, I think about 2 weeks ago, but correct me if I'm wrong, you had published an article about the technology that had seen the Tic Tac and connecting it to what? Give me a little bit of an idea of what your article entailed.
Yeah. So part of kind of the frustration I have with people that report on this topic is that they're doing it with either high interest or UFOs, or they're a general reporter or whatever. But there's a huge military technology part of this, because you're having sensors seeing these things, right? And you have to understand how these concepts of operation work to have any idea kind of how this is being interpreted on a technological level. So when it comes to the Nimitz event in 2004, that carrier strike group, the Nimitz carrier strike group, was equipped with a very cutting-edge technology called a cooperative engagement capability, CEC. And what that is it allows, through data links and using the sensors, the very powerful sensors on the ships and the aircraft, mainly at that time it was the Nimitz radar, the Spy 1D on its escorts, and then the E-2 Hawkeyes radar, the airborne early warning aircraft. it hadn't migrated to the actual fighters and such at the time. But what it does is it fuses all these radar pictures together. These radars are operating on different bands and different concepts of operation. It fuses their tracks in a single picture, so that way you get very high fidelity telemetry being viewed from multiple angles and multiple bandwidths of one target. It's a quantum leap in radar fidelity capability, and it's done via data link, porting all this information across in real time and fusing it using computers. So basically, the point is, for your listeners, to make the easy point, the easy description, is that the Nimitz at that time was equipped with the most capable air defense system mankind had ever created. And it had never been, it was just the first time that Nimitz strike group was working as a team together in training before deployment. So you can't test this. You can't test something against this just, in the middle of the desert.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It just doesn't exist. You can do elements of it, parts of it, to see how it sees certain objects in real life out of a lab, but in this case, you have a carrier strike group that is not, it's in training. These airplanes are not armed. They're not in combat air patrols. They're not in a combat posture. They're training to be in a simulated combat posture in a very remote area that we use for massive amounts of testing and clandestine testing. And it's just a perfect scenario, in my opinion, and I think pretty much, and others too, that are actually in this business, that if you were going to test something that was a very sensitive technology that only very few people could be read in on, that's probably and an aerial technology, right? Mm-hmm. That something that's flight performance. That would be a very, very opportune place and time to do that. And basically, the data you could get off that would give you it's basically a control variable. You know the performance of these systems, and you know that they're the best in the world. So you can take that and then, look at, okay, what can China see? What can Russia see? What are the human interpretations too? Like what does a pilot see when they engage one of these? What's the takeaway? There's other things to look at than just sensors and what they record. So this technology was present and during that Tic Tac event, and we have also heard from multiple sources, that the tapes from the CEC systems, the radar tapes and some of the communication tapes were seized, mm-hmm. were taken off the ships. Now, is that 100% correct? We have multiple people reporting it. I don't find it to be that outlandish, personally. And the people that say, well, it couldn't happen because I was there, to me, knowing what I know about the Navy operations in a carrier strike group, it doesn't seem to float. That would be a reason to discount it. But regardless, it's a fact. That's what these things were equipped with, and it seems to be that there was a high interest in the data that just those systems collected, not the FLIR pods, not the visual stuff, just those systems. So that's kind of a red flag for me. And then you fast forward to 2014, 2015, when we are having another strike group that is preparing for deployment, that is having supposedly constant issues with unknown aircraft in their airspace, doing the similar maneuvers, very high performance maneuvers. Well, we found out when we digged into that particular deployment is that carrier group 10 years later was just upgraded with the next generation of this same capability that now ports it over to the fighter jets and allows weapons engagement, where you can actually have a ship, for instance, fire a missile way far from where a Super Hornet is painting a target with its radar, over enemy battle space a couple hundred miles away, and that missile will remotely fly to that target that Hornet is looking at and destroy it. So we're talking remote launch here, very high-end telemetry and data link systems here. So once again, these things show up when these particular capabilities are being tested. There's other radar systems of similar nature that were being spiraled into the fleet at that time as well in that area, including the E-2D Hawkeye, which is one of the most powerful airborne radar systems in the world.
I have to jump in and ask, and I'm sure I'll get letters that I'm trying to debunk the story, and I'm honestly not, but just with your expertise, I can't help but ask, are you leaning then towards that this was potentially, these are naval vessels with this equipment. By the testimony that I've heard, it was a Air Force officer that came in, or officers
right.
That had came in and taken it. Are you leaning towards that these are just simply tests from one military outlet on another without potentially their knowledge?
I think it's a possibility.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's just one of the possibilities I put forward, is that we're seeing some interesting indicators and some patterns here with this. And just because the Air Force was involved, it's really not, when talking a program that's maybe very classified, right, that's extremely high-sensitive program, it doesn't really matter what branch is showing up, you know what I mean, or even if they're part of that branch. I'm really not even interested in that side. I'm just interested that seems to be the radar data seems to be what was important for them to retrieve, even over visual evidence.
Yeah.
Okay. So to me, that's odd, and people are really weird because no, we know the visual evidence was never touched. It was literally we know the guys that had the keys to the safe, right? And they're put in a squadron safe. It wasn't even the intel guys grabbing it and saying, we got to put up the chain of command. The after-action report on that, too, it seems that it hit a certain level and they didn't want any more to do with it as far as investigating it. So, it sounds to me like maybe at the very flag level, the top potentially knew that there was a test going on. And, how do you explain it to people? Oh, yeah, they're going to try to do this. By the way, this thing has capabilities that could change the Earth, the mankind's existence. But, hey, fly around out there. Let me know if you see them, but don't be worried, and sign this document. You have how many people on these ships? 6,000 on the carrier, 350 on a cruiser. You know what I mean? So we're talking a lot of people here. You're not going to be able to control that message, so you blow it off as a joke, and that will naturally happen, right? That's the culture, and you just get the data you need, and there's no risk. It's just and also you're seeing how it plays out over time potentially in the press, which they might have thought, hey, this very well could be a story in a week when the ship gets back into port.
Yeah, I would say in regards to the risk, you had fighters that were, unless I misunderstood you, so correct me, but in regards to the risk, you had fighters that were engaging this tic-tac object. So if it was a test and these guys and gals didn't know and they engaged this thing, there's a lot that can happen, right? Especially with technology that's being tested.
That's overplayed, to be honest with you.
Which part?
We have the idea that these things are in our airspace, they're a big danger. Yeah, anything in the airspace that isn't in communication with another aircraft or air traffic control is a potential danger. Okay, but considering the capability that this thing supposedly had, I don't think running into Super Hornet is going to be a huge threat. And beyond that, the idea is maybe they never even thought the chances of intercept were low. They weren't involved with it. I don't know. I just don't see a test like this that you can't explain. It is a very unique situation, being a huge threat to aircraft in the area, especially with the performance that these things have. I don't think getting out of the way of a Super Hornet is an issue, okay, with something that is defying what we understand is physics, okay? So there's that part of it as well. But generally speaking, it's one possibility. There's holes in it. It's not necessarily, we can't, that's one potentially. The idea that we have technology that's this incredible is another. Some people say, "Well, there's no way. It doesn't have wings and a jet. There's no way." I disagree with that potentially, just with an open mind. But it's one possible thing, and we do see some patterns of behavior and where this happened, and everything else that do make sense. It's interesting. To the Stars Academy has this show Unidentified, and there's. Some people say there's a real strong narrative in it, everything else, whatever. But they talked about this exact same thing I put out. Could this have been a test, and how could they have done this without anybody knowing about it, on the ship, and it was blind to them, they had no idea. And Steve Justice, the head dude at Lockheed for, aerospace engineering at Skunk Works, he said it's possible. He said, flag officers would maybe have known about it, and that what else can you do? He came to the same conclusion I did. And then they went to a guy named Chris Mellon who backed it out, saying that's ridiculous. They wouldn't have, put anything out there like that or whatever. But it's not like that's unheard of. And we tested nuclear weapons with our own people right there. I mean, it's not, the military does what it needs to do to get the data it needs within reason, and I think the risk is so low with what we're discussing that it's not a huge thing.
If I made you pick one explanation for what that 2004 Tic Tac incident was, what would it be?
I mean, I'd hate to do that because I really don't know.
So with all the, and I don't mean to interrupt you, with all the research you've done, you really can't lean towards anything.
For me, it's like, okay, is this ours?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a craft we're testing? Is this, alternatively, is this a capability that another country has that they're there to do the same thing, to test it against our stuff, and maybe it was unknown to us at our time, or is this men from another planet? Or whatever, drones from another planet. I can't say. I don't know, but I do think that there are indicators that it may be of a terrestrial origin, and it may be not. It may be an amazing technology, but a very mundane answer being, it's another secret program. They've got buried. They've had some breakthroughs. They needed to go and do something where they can actually test it in a very controlled but non-lab environment or non-range. You can only do so much in the middle of the Nevada desert. People don't get this. That airspace is not as big as people think it is.
Yeah, especially when you're going supersonic, subsonic, hypersonic, whatever. You can't stay in the background.
Intermedium, they go underwater. But if you have the ability to go even, to submerge, so there's only so much you can do. Let me put it this way: the RQ-170, which is a drone, it's a flying wing stealthy drone. It's not even. There's a good chance it's not even that advanced for what it's built to do. Okay, it's the same aircraft we lost in Iran in 2011, and it spied on Bin Laden. That's how helped identify that compound before we went in.
Mm-hmm.
It's a famous aircraft now. It lives in a gray state. It's semi-classified, but it's acknowledged. There is a test group out at Vandenberg Air Force Base that flies them out over the ocean. And we broke that story. And we have pictures of the aircraft coming and going. Now, these have lived at Tonopah Test Range Airport originally, and now they're at Creech Air Force Base, which is where all the drones are, all the MQ-9 Reapers are. And so they've lived in the Nevada desert their whole life, aside from deployment. But they're also out there, because there's a lot of things that thing needs to be able to do and be tested out over the water, and a lot of applications for it to do over water. So my point being is that you're limited in what you can do over the land ranges, even as expansive as they are in Nevada or in other areas, New Mexico, etc., that sometimes you need a lot of space. And if you need a lot of space to do it, or you need to do something like test against a carrier strike group with new technology that's fully integrated, there's really one of a very handful of places to do that, and off the Baja Coast is probably the preeminent one. One other thing I want to say, too, is that you got to also remember the Channel Islands is where these things emerged from. When I say things on radar, there are multiple things, but who knows? Electronic warfare could be part of this technology that could potentially show multiple targets. That's a whole other part of this, the electronic warfare angle, which we're going to be getting into soon. But the Channel Islands off the Southern California coast, 2 entire islands are military-controlled bases, okay? So that they do advanced testing on. There are 2 large airfields on those islands. A lot of people are talking about Catalina because of that To the Stars show. Catalina has nothing to do with this. That area is part of the test range, the Pacific Test Range there, the SoCal Range Complex. And there are 2 entire islands out of a number of 6 of them in total, 5 that are entirely military bases. There's a huge Navy SEAL military operations and urban terrain complex, a city they built out there to train with. There's a ton of stuff out there. So, and that range area is key for testing. So if you're going to if you have something really great that you need to, spread your wings on and go out and do something with and get real data from the best stuff you have, this is where you do it.
Do you find it interesting in that 2004? I guess Unidentified talked about it. I did not see the episode yet. I do plan to watch it. So for all of those who are going to send me hate mail for saying that, I really genuinely didn't see it. But I did hear they talked about the X-43 test, which has always been intriguing to me, where they tested it, and just by chance, it was within 48 hours of the Tic Tac incident, in the same general vicinity off the coast of Southern California. Is that interesting to you at all? I'm on the fence on whether or not that's like just a crazy coincidence or what.
I mean, I found that to be kind of a weird. I mean, it's a nice data point to say, hey, this was going on, but
yeah.
I didn't find it anything. I mean, that's an aerodynamic test they did out there of a hypersonic vehicle. Very, they need a lot of space to do it, and I believe it was quite a bit north of there. There's testing that gets done out there.
Yeah.
The tankers from Edwards that do clandestine aerial refueling for tests fly way out right over these areas. Not people think, oh, they're over Area 51, they're over Edwards, Mojave. No, they go out over the ocean. They test out there because there's not enough room to do a lot of this stuff in these other places. So it didn't. I mean, it's an interesting data point. I don't think it's anything to do with that. That's a linear acceleration, high-speed vehicle that was a known test. And it's interesting they put it on there, though.
Yeah, and I've always never thought that it was the same craft or anything like that. I just felt it was kind of interesting and bizarre that they were testing, this near Mach 10 aircraft within 48 hours of a very fast-moving something else. And that's what I was always curious about was, is there somewhat of a connection there, if at all? It's just a really weird coincidence. All of the articles that we're talking about, obviously you can get them at thewarzone.com. But for those who are listening that aren't aware, I have a show notes page for every episode that breaks down all of the links and articles, documents, whatever we are chatting about on the show notes page. You can get to that at www.theblackvault.com/show notes. Find this episode and you will see all of the links to Tyler's work, his website, and so on. Now, I've got to ask you here, we've got about 15 minutes or so left of my time with you, but one of the other articles that I'll link on that show notes page dropped in the last couple of weeks. You brought up to the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. This is the Tom DeLonge-led group where Mr. Luis Elizondo and Steve Justice and Chris Mellon all are involved. And the title of it, Tom DeLonge's Origin Story for To the Stars Academy, describes a government UFO info operation. I just want to bring this up because obviously this was fairly controversial for you, I think, anyway. I could be corrected here, but it was really controversial for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you do something like that, it's going to raise some eyebrows. There's a lot of people that are like absolute cultists with this To the Stars Academy thing, and they're really excited about it. And I don't blame them. People that think that UFOs have gotten a bad rap, and they're really into it. And a lot of times, it's not just it's an interest they're into. It's a social structure they're into. It's part of much more than just a topic that they read before they go to bed about. So there's some very passionate people and a lot of weird corners of this UFO community, right? So that's anytime that you challenge anything like that, it's gonna piss people off. They're gonna say, "Oh man, you're trying to screw this up. You're trying to detract from all the good that's being done by To the Stars Academy." And and I say in the piece, it seems like there is good being done by them, but I want to know who I'm rooting for if that's the case. And by Tom DeLonge's own account, and I think he's a creative guy. I think he's a cool guy. There's nothing personal. I think he's a talented person. He's done some pretty amazing stuff, for considering that he was a rock star, and it's cool that he has an interest in something like this. But at the same time, he is on record over and over again, not just making really outlandish claims, which I don't even go into. I leave those totally out. Just his origin story of how supposedly he went and pitched the top rungs of the military-industrial complex on a way to somewhat bring UFO information to light, but also give plausible deniability and paint the military-industrial complex in a good light. This is his words. This isn't me, trying to figure out what he's talking about. He goes into total detail. This is one interview that I transcripted out of many you can look at, and this was probably the most cohesive and believable one, okay? And it just goes into him basically meeting with people and them telling him that aliens exist and that the Cold War, made them classify it, and, they're potentially have nefarious purposes here on Earth, and on and on. If any of it's real, that'd be huge. But there are real parts, and that's the thing that we found out when I was looking into it. It all starts with him saying that he went to a barbecue at the Skunk Works because a friend hooked him up, and he wanted to pitch them an idea to do like a thing about UFOs, and to do this kind of quasi entertainment meets new fact company. A really weird deal. Your listeners have to read it to really understand. But he did go to this barbecue, and he did meet with top people at the Skunk Works, like he said he did. And it's one thing to go to barbecue. It's another thing to meet and have official meetings with them about a project.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not the easiest place to crack into on that level. Let's put it that way. I went to the Skunk Works. I said, hey, listen, the claims are that he was here during this, period of time. I need to know. And at first they came back with kind of a timid answer that really didn't say much, and I pushed again, and I have good relationships there. They're good to us. They try to help us when we have questions, and sometimes, most of the time, they can't answer us. But in this, they came back with an official statement that said, yes, he was there. Yes, he did have meetings, and that eventually they didn't end up going anywhere. But later on, we see in the Podesta emails that were leaked by WikiLeaks that not only was he having meetings with generals, retired generals, and very powerful people in the military area, especially in the advanced development area and space systems, and NASA, etc. But I mean, the head of Lockheed, I believe Lockheed Skunk Works, is on those email chains for those meetings. I don't know what he was talking about. I don't know if, this is half truth and there's, I have no idea. The idea with this piece was to put it out there so people can understand that this is what the CEO of the company is claiming. If it's true, then this was sponsored by the government. They worked with him to develop this. So the narrative is coming from that place, or at least was at the time. That was the idea. Or it's a lie, and I have a problem if this was all a lie, and this guy's the CEO of a company that's now trying to tell us what to believe with UFOs. At least if it was, come out and say, hey, listen, I was trying to do a movie, it was what it was, listen to my advisors that are now on the council. I mean, come clean with that so people can actually have some confidence in what they're hearing, A, where it is really originating from, and B, that it's just not BS.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if you lie on this level, why wouldn't you lie on another level? I don't know. I don't know what the deal is. I didn't make a judgment on it. I just said, here it is. Here's what we could confirm. Here's what we couldn't confirm. And I've reached out since, and said, hey, I'd love to do an interview with Tom and clear this all up. And I haven't gotten a response back, but I'm trying to at least get him and give him a chance to say, here's what happened, the good or the bad. I think he'd be better for it. Yeah, if he lied, listen, it is what it is. I think a lot of people would move on, but right now this still hangs in the air as a big mystery.
There's quite a bit that hangs in the air. Kudos to you for reaching out and trying to do your job right. I'm sorry to hear yet another time that they haven't responded to you. I know that they've done that before with journalists that, just want to try and get answers. And I'm not sure why that secrecy is. I want to ask you a sensitive question. You can decline to answer it, but I just would regret not asking it. Obviously, the last couple of weeks with the Pentagon themselves getting into it and saying that one of Tom DeLonge's people involved, Mr. Luis Elizondo, is essentially not who he claims to be, that he did not head the ATIP program. Obviously, that is on the show for History Channel and Unidentified. And obviously, that is still being, touted to the stars, and they're not backing off of it. It's kind of like this gigantic pink elephant that no one on that side wants to address. Those that have addressed it, the very few, I hate to say it, they just have a financial connection to Mr. Elizondo, and they literally benefit because they're business owners with the guy on his story. So nothing has come out to really refute that. Can I ask what your thoughts are when you kind of add that into the mix, that now they have somebody literally on the payroll that's starring in this show, that the Pentagon has now weighed in, which I thought was unprecedented, because generally the Pentagon just stays out of everything,
right?
And no comment, or you'd never get a response. Can I ask you what you think of all that?
Of course, yeah. I mean, I think that's really valid. I think that's, and I've said this over and over, and I've made this clear that this type of investigation, this type of vetting, is good for To the Stars Academy, because if it's true and what they say is generally correct, then the cream rises to the top and they become much more trustworthy, right? Their narrative will be really valued more than it is now with things hanging out in the air like this. And it's part of the process when you have a television show in prime time that's claiming a lot of things or looking into things and claiming people at certain positions. So I think that this is the most healthy thing that can happen, is respectfully looking into issues like this.
Yeah.
With Lou, he seems to be, to me, just my gut is, it seems like he knows quite a bit about what that program was up to. I have no idea if he led it, if he was a security officer in the program, and or if he was a middleman for it and just got reports and reported to somebody else. I really don't know. And I do think it's important that we get to the bottom of it and that we find out exactly what the deal was there. On the other side, is the government trying to burn him? Did he go off the reservation for some reason and they're trying to burn him? I hate to go into that, but with the history of this topic, you have to.
Absolutely.
And say, hey, listen, and that'd be really frustrating for a guy like him, regardless of his motives and everything else, that, he is maybe trying to do what he thinks is right. But at the same time, the people that he once worked with are now saying you're persona non grata, to the point that we're going to burn you and your reputation. I don't know, if that's something that's what, I don't know what the policy is for that or how that works or if that even exists. But I think it's something, because this topic is so opaque and that they're getting so much publicity on this, not just with the show, but on all networks, that they could do. So for me, I wish I could give a definitive answer. He seems like a cool cat, and he seems like he's a knowledgeable guy. One of the biggest issues I have with him running ATIP isn't even this. It's that, the Defense Intelligence Agency and the DoD, there's an entire ecosystem, and intelligence community, let me say that, and intelligence community especially. There's an entire ecosystem called foreign material exploitation for intelligence, and that's where they actually they look at foreign aircraft, foreign missile systems, whatever, and try to learn the secrets of them and exploit them. And a lot of times it has to do with having your hands on them, getting them from a clandestine source and testing them and learning how to either beat them tactically or to build the attributes into your own systems if they're good attributes to have and that we don't already have. This is a huge and largely clandestine ecosystem that already exists. Then there's just the aerial intelligence side of just foreign programs and looking at aircraft and capabilities and writing reports on it and products that can be used to create tactics and strategy, right? So my point is this: odd to me that a guy with counterintelligence background with nothing to do with aerospace anything ends up running a program about aerospace threats that are so extremely advanced we don't even know where they supposedly come from.
Yeah.
So that's a question for me. That doesn't say that, hey, it's the DOD, man. I've seen some pretty crazy bureaucratic decisions. Very well that's just the case. They put a guy on it that is a career guy, and then they bring in those experts. That might be the case too, but it just seems a little odd to me, just by looking at it from an outsider looking at it.
No, so, I think you're spot on. I mean, when you look at history and you look at verified UFO programs like Blue Book, we'll just blanket it with Project Blue Book. It was headed by the military, and so that could be a head scratcher in itself. However, they knew that they were not qualified to essentially research that specific angle. So they brought in people like scientists, Dr. J. Allen Hynek for one,
right,
and quite a few. So that's what always kind of, again, one of the many red flags here on this story that I thought might have an easy answer, but the silence is kind of deafening.
It is, and you know what? I hope that there is a good answer for it, and for him and his reputation, and like I say, I wish no ill will on anybody, and I applaud anybody who's trying to make progress in something that they're passionate about, without do tons of harm to anybody. And he seems like a cool guy. I mean, I have nothing against him, but it would be nice to get it cleared up. But above all else, these types of investigations have to happen in order for To the Stars Academy to achieve its goals. That's why I'm so passionate about saying this.
Yeah.
Is that you can't just be into truth, government, tell us what the truth is, but not field questions and take people's genuine concerns seriously, and just letting people know that there is an answer for the concerns they have. And that way, they'll be all that much more trusted when it comes to making some pretty big claims or telling people that a threat from maybe an unknown source is real.
Yeah. I would think that if you published an article tomorrow morning and said John Greenewald's a fraud, he has never run the Black Vault, and there's someone else doing the research, he's just taking credit, I would be all over you in a minute with evidence or something to prove my side. The reason why I say that is I'm surprised here at it's about 3 weeks actually when this episode's dropping from the first publication of the Pentagon statement. The only thing that we've seen is a document that predates his claim. And that's worrisome because the last thing I'll say on it really quick is I have worked very hard along with people that are much smarter and have been around the field much longer than me to get the media to take this topic seriously. If we're building a house of cards on a very unstable foundation that there's truths trickled in. I mean, he's got knowledge of the program, so I mean, I've never doubted that. So there's some knowledge there, but if that foundation of the house of cards is based on fabrication or half truths, this thing is going to crumble, and we're going to be kind of set back. Right now, it's really cool. People are doing UFO stories, and seems like it's being taken seriously. Kind of, you could pick apart some of the quote unquote journalists out there, but regardless, it looks like it's overall very good. But in the end, if this does crumble and there's no evidence whatsoever to counter this, that makes me worried. And I think that there's a lot of questions that are important to ask. I just wanted to put this one to bed, and I'm surprised 3 weeks later, nobody has.
And I am too. And my best advice, as you can tell, would be to just be open about what the reality is. Even if there was some fibs or whatever, or something was misconstrued, just the more you are open, you set that example, the better off you're going to be. And people are very forgiving, when it comes to stuff like this. And so hopefully we can get some answers. Maybe when the show is over, they'll be able to be more open and maybe get more interviews with people that will really, actually throw them some hardball questions. I'm hoping so. Like I say, I hope that they're successful. I have no ill will to them. I just want to make sure that that I'm, at least rooting for the right team, or where it's coming from. And it very well could be that all the intentions are in the right place, and it's a mixed bag. We don't know yet, but reporting like what you're doing and stuff is key to getting it to where we can actually have some faith in these people. And like you say, build a foundation for this topic that at least will eventually get us to the truth, no matter what it is.
Yeah, I hope they heed your advice because it's very well said. I have said it 1,000 times now in the last week. If there is evidence, I will help To the Stars Academy disseminate it to disprove the Pentagon, and then we can move on to bigger and better questions about the narrative. But if we're 3 weeks in, I'm pretty worried, to be honest with you. I didn't want this. I think it's going to do more harm than good. Right now, as we stand on June 21st, it's cool in the media, but in the long run, I do worry. Tyler, I can't thank you enough for your time. Again, for those listeners, you can get his work and follow all of the amazing coverage, not only on UFO topics, but as Tyler explained, he covers a lot, and the War Zone covers a lot. At www.thewarzone.com. That is part of thedrive.com. Tyler, I really do appreciate all of your time today and answering all of my questions. I hope you do consider coming back.
Oh, it's a blast, man, and thanks for all the great work you do. I'm a fan too, so it's great to see the stuff that you do and getting some good truth out there for people to look and at least evaluate for their own eyes, and they can make their own decisions based on that. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Happy to come back anytime you need me.
Well, I appreciate that coming from you. Thank you very much, and thank you all for listening. This is John Greenewald Jr. signing off. We'll see you next time.